this hurts. I hate getting hurt. So I think what happened was that I guess I just got old enough to accept rejection a lot better.
Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of The Greatest Comeback, a podcast that explores the transformative power of failure and how adversity can be the catalyst for our growth, our healing, and becoming the greatest versions of ourselves. And by the greatest versions of ourselves, I mean that in the most esoteric way. For those of you who are new to the podcast, perhaps you're a first-time listener, the premise of the podcast is as follows. Adversity is guaranteed, self-inflicted or as a result of misfortune. So knowing it's guaranteed, surely the work that we are here to do as human beings having this human experience isn't to run away from it, but rather to study it, to learn from it, to expose ourselves to it. Kind of think of it as a mouth rinse for the soul. And so I look for people and stories that provide evidence of this for me. And it's through this lens and with this background that I would like to introduce my next guest. I have been interested in the subject of failure, and for the purposes of this podcast, let's call it rejection, if we can, for reasons that will become clear shortly. And it was precisely at this time that I came across an article in The Guardian called "Stay True to Yourself and Fly Closer to the Sun: What 50 Years of Rejection Has Taught Me." And it was told through the lens of a freelance writer. The author of that article talks about the collective wisdom of having had thousands of writing projects rejected over 50 years. There are gems in the article, but the real hook in that article was the fact that the author reframed rejection in a way that saw it be perceived and used as instructive rather than something that diminishes us. And that's really what got me interested. That writer's name is Bob Brody. Bob is an essayist, a journalist, an author. His writings focus largely on family, friends, fatherhood, marriage, and domestic and community life. He contributes personal essays and op-eds to the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, among many other publications. His pieces have also featured in The Atlantic, The Guardian, and he has written regularly for the New York Daily News since the late 1970s. Bob is the author of the memoir Playing Catch with Strangers. A family guy, reluctantly, in brackets, comes of age. And also Edge Against Cancer, profiles of 12 athletes who came back from the disease to compete again. In his 50 years as a freelance writer, Bob has written everything from satire to celebrity profiles, investigative reports about physicians addicted to drugs. He has covered topics that range from health, psychology, crime to fitness, business, and the physics of shooting a basketball. His work is run in such publications as Esquire, GQ, New York Magazine, Men's Health, Glamour, and many more. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't already guessed, Bob is the guest today. Bob Brody, welcome to The Greatest Comeback.
Thank you, Luke. I'm very pleased to be with you.
My friend, thank you for agreeing to do this too. It was such a pleasure to get to know you, and it was nice to make your acquaintance and really talk about a subject that is very close to both of our hearts, and that's rejection.
I'm always up for a stimulating discussion. I just hope I don't wind up getting rejected here.
Listen, before we get to the article, Bob, what I'm interested in your the subjects that you write about. You know, your bio talks about family, community, fatherhood. What is the theme that runs through all that for you? What do you think has drawn you to that particular subject material?
It's personal. I take everything personally. I write about what I know, and what's closest to me, what's close to my heart. I suppose some could characterize it as a form of narcissism. The great essayist E.B. White posed the question, why would people be interested in what we have to say? But it does turn out that sometimes, because we're speaking about subjects that are close to other people's hearts, they do care what we have to say, oftentimes. So I'm hard pressed to find a direct through line. I mean, I could speculate, I could theorize about it, but um, maybe what it all comes down to is just talking to each other and communicating with each other and how we treat each other, the dynamics of relationships, the value of kindness and compassion, the ugliness of cruelty, um, just absolute. I mean, I think what it comes down to for me is the fundamentals. I mean, nothing is more fundamental than family, friendship, work. Um, and so those would seem to me to be the themes. It's not something I've really thought about. I mean, I've thought in terms of the topics that I write about, but themes is a different matter altogether. And certainly having a motif that runs through my life, um, I think that kind of thinking might be above my pay grade.
Yeah. um, I do want to talk about the article, Bob. Um,
Sure.
Clearly, 50 years of rejection is quite a lot of rejection. Why write about rejection, and why write about it now?
It never occurred to me to write about it before. Um, But I was going through a rough patch. I was going through one of those patches where it felt like everything I was sending out was getting turned down. And I should know by now, having gone through patches like this before, that everything runs in cycles, that life has its rhythms, and that you get accepted, you get rejected. You have night and day, you have slow and fast. I mean, everything is ups and downs and sometimes sideways. So I really should have learned by now to take it in stride. But I was taking it hard. I mean, this was a rough patch, and I kept thinking, why is this still happening? Why? Um, what should happen is that everything I send out should be treated as if it came from the heavens, or from Olympian heights, and automatically be accepted. That was not happening. So I was going through this rough patch, and it forced me to think to myself, oh, I've really dealt with this sort of stuff a lot for a long time now. Maybe it's time I tried to figure out what's happening, why it happens, what I can do about it, maybe what other people can do about it, to just try to distill the whole ongoing issue of rejection, in my own head, and also in the form of a piece, in the form of an essay.
Yeah. Um,
And
has
and
that?
I write. I mean, sometimes, just to expand on what you asked me before, I think, um, I write essays a lot of the time to just try to make sense of something for myself.
Mm,
Sometimes it's to try to make sense of my own life. Sometimes it's try to make sense of a family member's life, whether it's my mother, my father, my son, my daughter, my wife, my mother-in-law. Um, and sometimes it's to just make sense, try to make sense of what I think the universe is about and telling me. So I was trying to make sense of rejection.
yeah. I want to talk about. In fact, in a minute, I'll ask you if you don't mind to kind of um, summarize or deliver the the proof point that you're looking to deliver in your article. If you can find a way of doing that, I'd appreciate that, Bob, just to give some context to people that might not have read the article. I think it might be worthwhile if you could just give an overview of what the core thesis in the article is. Um, but before we get to that, your relationship with rejection, you mentioned that what inspired the article was the fact that you were going through a difficult period.
Yes.
And I guess that leads me to think, is acceptance something that you've recently found a way of receiving? Um, or do you think it's just that has been the 50 years of rejection has been the required minutia that has fed the neurological and psychological Bob Brody to the point that now he is ready to let go of some of that stuff.
Yes. I think all these years I've had a certain level of acceptance for my situation, predicament, plight, call it what you will. And I think it depended on how everything was going. Obviously, I was much more accepting of success than I was of failure. Failure is hard to accept, just by its nature. Um, but I think because I wrote the article and because I came to understand and appreciate rejection better than I ever had, and appreciate the value of it, appreciate it what it had to teach me. Um, it's more ingrained in me now, and I think I've attained a higher level of acceptance. I think maybe I'm coming close to um, um, uh, just having a grasp of the art of acceptance.
Mm.
And I think, I mean, there is no shortcut. There is no fairy dust that can be sprinkled here. I think, uh, at least in my own experience, it seems to me that it just comes with what you might call maturity. I think it's very hard to preach this sort of stuff, as in, well, you just have to accept rejection. It's very hard to preach that to somebody, well, say to a 20-year-old version of me. My 25-year-old self was going to have none of it. I mean, if you had told me, well, you just have to power through and keep going and stay tough and hang strong and all the rest, I would have thought, okay, yada, yada, yada. Good for you. Thank you very much. I appreciate the life lesson you're trying to teach me here, but this hurts, and it hurts a lot. And I, I hate getting hurt, and it gets wearisome. Um, so I think what happened was that I guess I just got old enough to accept rejection a lot better. I think it also helped me that over the years, I have had some measure of success. I mean, if all I had done in my whole career was face failure, forget it. I mean, to me, that's almost imponderable how I would have dealt with that. I mean, it would have been shattering. I don't know that there's any real coming back from that. I mean, I would like to think that there is, because, I mean, you hear about people who achieve late life success. Um, but I've had successes all along. Minor successes, moderate successes, borderline major successes here and there. That helped a lot. That really helped a lot. I mean,
Mm.
if you have that, it just kind of greases the wheels, and helps you, enables you to accept rejection a lot better, I think, than you otherwise could have.
Yeah. I mean, the point of the article really, and Bob, feel free to jump in here, that your position is effectively, as I understand it, this accumulation of rejection as a narrative writer, as a journalist, as an author, as an essayist, um, has effectively um, taken you through this journey of, I think you call it the 7 stages of rejection. And acceptance is almost like it's in mystical terms, it's like sadhana, or it's like enlightenment. It would appear. In fact, as I was preparing for this conversation, I was thinking about a lot of the Eastern traditions and comparing them to the 7 stages of rejection that you write about in the article. But it looks very much like there's an ascension that one has to go through in terms of coming to terms with rejection. Do you want to talk to the 7 stages of rejection as you see them, Bob?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to remember all of them in the right order. I mean, what I can say, for example, is that at certain stages, I have thought that my rejections the rejections I was receiving was everybody else's fault. And so I was quick on the trigger to blame the editors at publications that were rejecting my pieces, that they really should have known better, that they should have recognized my abilities. And so shame on them. And I was more than peeved. I would be angry. And so one of the lessons that I learned, and I guess you could call it one of the stages, is just recognizing that perhaps I could do better, and that I ought to maybe take a harder, colder longer look at what I've written and see how I can make it better. And that's been important, and um, that's been true through much of my career. That was not necessarily a revelation that arrived on my doorstep within the last year. But I think that's part of it. Maybe you could help me remember some of the stages,
I think
because
there was there was anger.
yeah,
There was I've written them down somewhere. But look, by the by, I think it was an interesting architecture to take people
yeah. I
through.
mean, what inspired me to take that structural approach was what inspired me to structure it like that was the Kubler-Ross uh, stages stages of grief, um, because it seemed that there were certain parallels between the stages of grief and the stages of rejection. So um, that was what I sort of patterned the 7 stages after.
Um, what is
And also, I have
I
to
guess
admit, just in the interest of packaging the essay, um, people are, for good or for ill, very much taken with certain formulaic approaches to issues. So it's 5 tips for this, and it's
yeah.
10 secrets for that, and 7 reasons you should stop doing this or that. So I figured maybe if I could somehow quantify this, and luckily the Kubler-Ross parallel materialized in my head, because it just fit. I mean,
Hmm.
it just felt like, yes, that's what rejection is like too. It's obviously different from grief. Um, uh, Certainly less of a hardship in the scheme of everything, but it's a difficulty in its own right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I try and inoculate myself from rejection and failure. And the way I do it is, it doesn't always work well, but the way I do it, I try, and I think that the trick for me is to keep on reminding myself that um, it's not personal. And I know I'm saying that to a writer. I know I'm saying that to a writer that is opening his heart quite often and expressing his thoughts and emotions um, in a way in order to connect with people. And sometimes that submission is, turned down. So I can appreciate that leaves a mark. Um, but I am fascinated with your assertion that there is something instructive about rejection. And I think
Yeah,
that,
I mean, please
please,
go ahead. Yeah, no, it just goes back to what you said about this about it everything accumulating, and I mean, taking it personally. As far as taking it personally and being angry about it, um, it's an opportunity to develop. I mean, you just have to. Um, Editors have all people get rejected for all kinds of reasons. Freelance writers get rejected for all kinds of reasons. It could have nothing to do with me. And
hmm,
it's taken me a long time to start to appreciate how deep that runs. Um, I deal with it on a regular basis. And I know from what editors have said to me, and again, this applies beyond freelance writing. What editors have said to me sometimes is, I have a similar piece already in-house. So there's nothing I can do about that. I had no idea that they had something similar, or the editor is about to ask somebody to do something similar. Or they covered this topic recently. So this could apply to other professions and other kinds of salesmanship as well. It's a matter of just asking yourself why. Why am I getting rejected? And getting past the idea that it's because they're rejecting me. It's because they're rejecting what I'm submitting, and they have their own reasons. And also, editors, again, like anybody you're pitching on anything, they have other stuff going on in their life that has nothing to do with what you just submitted by email. So that editor may be having a god-awful day. That editor's mother might be dying. That editor might be terribly distracted and have taken too fast a look at what I've sent to see its merits. There's all kinds of stuff that's going on that has nothing to do with me and that I have zero control over. And this is one of the kind of revelations that I came to that makes it easier to accept rejection. Once you start to appreciate that it may, I repeat, may have nothing to do with you. I mean, one bears a certain level of responsibility, and I do. But if it has nothing to do with you, then what are you supposed to do about it? If you have no control over it, what can you do? So there's a certain kind of surrender that happens, as in your will just implores you to say, okay, that's how it's going with this particular editor, and so on. But I mean, you mentioned in the introduction that I've gone through thousands of rejections, and it probably sounds worse than it actually is, because many of the pieces, not many, a fair number of the pieces of mine that have appeared over the last 20 years or so were rejected before they were accepted somewhere. And so the thousands of rejections that I think I probably mentioned in my piece, those are rejections of pieces that ultimately, in most cases, were accepted and came out. But sometimes I need to go through 5 rejections before I get to an acceptance, or 10. And sometimes it's even gone beyond that. And it's just a matter, in those cases, you keep going. I mean, if you still believe in the piece, you keep going. Sometimes also you have second thoughts, and this happens once in a while. You say to yourself, this piece has gotten turned down 10 times. I'm kind of losing faith in it. And it's not just because it's getting turned down. It's because I'm having second thoughts about it. I'm wondering if I maybe could do better with it. Maybe I'm just going to shove it in the cold file and let it marinate for a while. And maybe I'll go back to it in 6 months. And it's happened that I've gone back to pieces that were widely rejected and spruced them up and sent them out and gotten them accepted. Sometimes it's just not the right time for something. So that too is a reason for some rejections. It's not the right time for that piece, that effort that you made to go into the public light.
Yeah. I've always thought that if you can take the egoic response out of that rejection and find a way of not taking that personally, there's a lot of utilitarian value in rejection as a commodity. I've always been fascinated with fear and rejection, because these are the things that we tend to run away from. We hide them under the bed. We don't let the neighbors know. We don't let the community know. We don't tell our cousins that this has happened, for goodness sake. And I've always been interested in our inclination to want to, I guess, in a way, hide our shame, because it occurs to me that it's not a huge leap to go from perceiving rejection as something that diminishes us to perceiving rejection as something that sharpens the blade. There are a couple of little mantras that I write on a piece of paper and I look at most days, Bob, as I sit down to start my day. It's on my desk, and they're just simple statements, but I read them and I'll read them out loud, and it's a way of triggering my brain and inoculating myself from the rejections that I anticipate coming into contact with today, And so I'll say things like, treat failure like a science. I love that line. Treat failure like a science. Because if I can take the personal out of that and I can just look at that through the cold eyes of a scientist, each attempt becomes an experiment. Each attempt gives me a clue in terms of what the right route might be, And so these are the sorts of things that I think I'm interested in cultivating as a conversation and really getting people to buy into, because I think there's some relief in reframing the way we perceive, our rejections and our failures. The other couple of things that I say to myself every day, Bob, and this is a quote by James Joyce, mistakes are the portals of discovery.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's transcendent. Absolutely.
Isn't that beautiful?
Oh, leave it to Joyce.
Right. And the other thing I say is I'm not failing. I'm refining.
Mm-hmm.
I'm experimenting, So these are the little reframes that I use myself to try and rewire the way I perceive rejection and failure. Because again, I love that quote by is it Viktor Frankl? Between impetus and response, there is a space, and within that space, there is a choice. And if we choose freedom leads us to growth. And I'm sure I've butchered that, but I think there's a lot of value that I see as I've accumulated knowledge and as I've sought to treat my suffering through the accumulation of wisdom. Those are the sorts of things that occur to me, is that rejection, rather than something that should diminish me, or I should perceive it as diminishing me, can I treat this like a rep that I would do on a bench press at a gym, And if I can see it that way, then the poison is removed from the bite.
Yeah. You touched on something really interesting here, because I never really talk to people about all the rejections I've accumulated. I hate to sound self-pitying and or as if I'm trying to elicit sympathy from people. And also, it's been hard for me to imagine why anybody would be interested in hearing me um, whine about getting rejected. It's also, I mean, I guess I've treated it. It's never been a matter of shame, and it's never been a matter of guilt for me. It's just been a matter of privacy, as in, I'm keeping this to myself. This is for me to deal with, and I'm going to deal with it as best I can, and I'm not going to bother anybody about it, and I don't want anybody worrying about me. But when I went through this rough patch and wrote this article was cathartic for me. Just sometimes when you write something, I mean, I mentioned before that I sometimes write essays to try to figure something out, to try to make sense of something. And the origin of the word essay is to make an effort to try to find out something, to explore. And in putting together this article, I did come to understand much better what I've gone through all these years. I did manage to put it in perspective, and and in a way that that made sense for me, and obviously made sense for my editors at The Guardian.
How was the response, or how has the response been to that particular article relative to everything else you've submitted over the years?
It was really good. I mean, people sent me emails, they sent me messages on LinkedIn. Um, I know what you're going through. I've gone through that myself. You really articulated the issue. Um, it was a very, I mean, it demonstrated for me the, I think as much as anything, the reach that The Guardian has. So I have to give credit where credit is due, because where you get published very much determines the level of impact that it has. Um, and so I was very pleased by the extremely positive response. I mean, I heard from lawyers who said, "Yeah, I go through this. I could be talking to a jury, I could be talking to a judge, I could be dealing with the opposing attorney." I heard from salespeople who said, "Yeah, I mean, I get rejected all the time, and uh, you have to grow a thick skin." And um, from different kinds of professionals, it was very interesting to me to hear how this cut across vocations as much as it did. And to my editor's credit, she did explicitly ask me, because this piece was originally just about freelance writing. She did say, "Please tell us a little about how this is applicable to people who are not freelance writers." And I thought that was a wonderful suggestion. And I followed through on that with a few words about that. Because the truth is, rejection is universal. Everybody's been rejected for one thing or another. It could be a guy asking a girl for a date. It could be something as basic as that, or it could be something professional, along professional lines. Um, or it could be a politician running for office, and uh, the the body politic saying no, thank you. So everybody's hit by it, and I think that's one reason that the piece evoked such a response, because it really is just one of those topics that seemed to touch a nerve.
Yeah, yeah. I think, look, it certainly touched a nerve for me, and I think for a number of reasons, not least of which is because I too am an expert in rejection and failure, but I wave that flag proudly, Bob. You know, because I think there is a lightness to holding failure and rejection that way, and perceiving it that way, as something that is ultimately going to, one way or another, it's going to shape me into the type of individual that can accomplish that thing eventually, with a combination of delusional self-belief and consistent aligned action. You can, I can be rejected 1,000 times, 10,000 times if I'm showing up. If I'm showing up, then I can see a path forward. And I think that was what drew me to your article. And the other thing that drew me, Bob, is that you showed a little bit of yourself, and human beings tend to, particularly in public arenas, we tend to kind of want to cover up, and we don't want to say anything that is going to be up for debate, or maybe we'll get some blowback if we bring up a certain topic or we hold a certain point of view. And we certainly don't want to show any vulnerability, and we don't want to acknowledge failure, because that would somehow diminish our value, our brand value in the public marketplace, or so the stories that we hold dear would have us believe. And so when I see examples of people saying, here is a piece of me, for better or worse, I'm putting that on the table as an offering, with the expectation that other people are going to go, yes, that's me. I see that. I feel that. I recognize that. And I think that's what, that's if I could sum it up, that was the single thing in that piece of writing for me, Bob, that drew me to it and drew me towards you. And that is and continues to be the fact that you were prepared to kind of open the window shades for a minute and say, take a look.
It's definitely something I never would have done 20 years ago. It never would have occurred to me to do it 20 years ago because I would have felt exposed. I would have felt weakened. I would have felt I was diluting my brand, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, there is definitely a stigma attached to talking about failure. I mean, people pay lip service to it and they say, well, everybody fails, and before you can succeed, you have to fail. And failure can be educational for you. And one of the best questions I've ever heard human resources people ask in interviews is, tell me about your failures, and how you dealt with them. I think that's a great question to ask a job candidate, because people go in thinking, well, I'm just going to talk about all my successes. And that's all well and good. And well, you should. But to talk about your failures is just, I think, inherently a lot more revealing of character than talking about successes. Because it'll show how you dealt with it and also what you made of it, how you interpreted it, and possibly how you learned from it and benefited from it. I mean, I think that the affirmations that you mentioned before are great, and I mean, one of the imperatives, I think, when you're dealing with rejection is asking yourself the question, did I do my best? Um, I just think it's key to ask yourself that and to be honest with yourself about it. I mean, one reason I've probably pulled submissions from circulation is that I had the afterthought that maybe I could have done better with this. Maybe I should have done better, and maybe I still can do better with it. Maybe I did not give this 150%. Maybe I only gave it 85%. I mean, luckily, I'm kind of in the habit of doing my best every time out. But I think it's an important question for people to ask when they're getting rejected. I mean, it really is. It comes down to the whole, okay, maybe it's not you, the person who's rejecting me, who's responsible for this. Maybe it's me. And maybe I should have tried harder.
I'm interested to understand how you deal with rejection now. Has that changed? Do you still face the same obstacles, hurdles in that process? And if I can offer something that might resonate, and I'd be interested to understand whether it does or not. I'm a meditator, and oftentimes people will ask me, Luke, how does meditation help you? And the way I describe it, Bob, is I still have those moments during the day when I get pissed off. I still have those moments. But the active life cycle of that period of pissed offedness is shorter. And so I offer that as a framework for the question that I'm asking you now, and that is, how is your relationship with accepting rejection? What does it look like now? And is it a case of the active life cycle of that feeling of anger, depression, is it just a case of that period being shorter now before you can return to some sort of base level regularity in your nervous system?
Yeah, I mean, I would love nothing more than to attribute my improved acceptance of rejection to my achieving wisdom on the mountaintop. Um, but I think it's, if I'm to be honest with myself, I think it just really is that I got older. I got older, and I think um, as you get older, you go through certain stages too, and are if you're. I think one sign of maturity is tends to be that you're more accepting of what's going on, because you realize either it's beyond your control, much of it is beyond your control, and all you can control is yourself. I mean, it goes back to Stoic philosophy, just accepting that, and even what Alcoholics Anonymous has always said about having the power to understanding that you do not have control over everything, and really all you can try to control is yourself. So um, again, I wish there were some magic to this, and I really wish that I had some wisdom to impart to writers and other people who deal with rejection, and who are in their 20s and in their 30s and in their 40s. Um, it's just much easier for me to say what I'm saying about accepting rejection now that I'm in my 70s.
Mm.
I doubt I could even have said this in my 60s. It just takes a long time. Um, and it's a matter of experience, uh, converting you into something I mean, just transforming your attitude. Um, I think that's really been the key for me, and it's one of the reasons getting older. I mean, you quoted Joyce on mistakes being the portal to discovery. Um, I would say that aging is a portal to discovery too. I mean, that's contingent on whether you're paying attention to what's going on around you, and it also depends on whether you're trying to get better and trying to live a better life and trying to do right by yourself and others. Not everybody tries. Not everybody tries that hard. Um, so it depends on a lot of different factors. Um, but if you're trying to live your life right, then with age comes these understandings. I mean, my grandmother um, used to say to me when I was a kid, "You learn something every day." Now, I thought that was just a cliche, and I thought she was just kind of pontificating, and I never put that much stock in it when I was a kid. I thought, okay, I guess that sounds good. Um, I just had yet to witness any proof of it, because I mean, whatever age I was, maybe I was 12, maybe I was 10, I, I was pretty comfortable with the idea that I already knew everything I needed to know. And the idea that I still had stuff to learn was just shocking to me. Um, and I think a lot of us have that arrogance of youth and that sense of invulnerability. But we outgrow it. I mean, if we're lucky, we outgrow our immaturity, and we outgrow that misapprehension that we have about ourselves, and we arrive at the understanding that in the scheme of everything, we know nothing. And the sooner we understand that we know nothing, we understand everything.
Yeah. You mentioned getting older and your age. I don't think you'd mind if I indicated that you're in your 70s. How do you look at life now that you're in your 70s? What do you hope for in that decade for you?
More of the same, I would say, and if possible, a little better. Um, I'm trying to build on what I've done and what I have every day. At the same time, I I love the life I have. I'm very grateful for the life I have. Um, I have family, I have friends, I have my work. Um, we have a dog. The food here in Italy, where I live, is unbelievable. Um, so I'd be very happy with more of the same if I could sustain this sort of baseline for a while. I'd be very happy with that. Um, when it comes to my family, I'd love to be a better husband, a better father, a better grandfather. When it comes to friendship, I'd love to be a better friend. Um, a- and when it comes to writing, I'd love to be a better writer. Um, I I think I mean, what's ahead is more striving, and more climbing up the hill, um, and just trying to take it higher, and reach new levels of understanding, appreciation, um, and also I know this maybe sounds highfalutin, but um, just somehow be more virtuous and have even even greater integrity. And just years ago, the U.S. Army had a commercial running, and it had a tagline that I know a lot of people remember, and the tagline was "Be all you can be," and that tagline has stayed with me over the years, and I have really come to see that it kind of says it all. I mean, if you can be what you can be, then you're really doing everything you should be doing. And also, if you try to be what you can be, your odds are you're going to get there. You're going to get where you're supposed to go.
Yeah. I want to go back to the article for a minute, Bob. Um, you quote Saul Bellow, the Nobel Prize winning novelist, and the quote is: "Rejections teach a writer to rely on his own judgment and to say in his heart of hearts, 'To hell with you.'"
Yeah.
What do you think he meant by "To hell with you"?
Well, I love that quote. I quoted it in my piece, and I think what it means is that you have to. I mean, you it helps a lot if you keep believing in yourself. If it helps a lot if you believe that what you are doing, whether it's writing or law or medicine or digging ditches or welding, whatever you're doing, if you are giving it your all, uh, eh, then good for you. Uh, and that's what you have to live by. It comes down to faith in yourself and
Mm.
faith in your abilities. Um, and he's absolutely right. I mean, the truth is, I've ever since I started writing, I've had varying degrees of faith in myself. I mean, the level of faith will fluctuate, and sometimes I'm encouraged and highly motivated, and sometimes I'm discouraged. Um, and sometimes you even have to have a little arrogance. Um, uh, I mean, really, does anybody succeed wildly without some degree of arrogance? I mean,
Or failure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so I think Bello was, in my case, I mean, just preaching to the choir. You do have to get to the point where you say, and I've thought this. I've thought, well, that editor is missing the opportunity here by rejecting me. And I mean, I remember I got fired once from a job, and the reason I got fired, I should say, was that my boss wanted me to work 6 days a week for the same money that I was receiving for 5 days a week. And I said to him, if I'm going to work 6 days a week, I'd like to be paid for 6 days a week. And he fired me. And I said to him, you're making a mistake. This was a very small newspaper, very small weekly community newspaper in Manhattan. It still publishes and it's still popular. But it was a neighborhood newspaper, community newspaper. And so I got fired. But I said to him, you're making a mistake. And when I look at that remark now, I think to myself, well, good for you, 25-year-old self.
Yeah.
Because that was kind of arrogant. And it was true that I did go beyond weekly community newspapers. Nothing wrong with them, by the way. But to this guy's credit, his response to me was, when I said to him, you're making a mistake, he said, maybe I am. And I thought, well, okay. That's decent of you to acknowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's that was the point that I was hoping you'd pick up on is, is to hell with you or to hell with that. I think yeah, I mean, you can certainly interpret that as maybe arrogant, but what comes through for me is the importance of self-belief.
Yes.
Whether you're a writer or whether, to your point, irrespective of what your particular calling is or vocation is, I think to hell with that speaks to an inner knowing. It speaks to, I cannot explain this in logic. I cannot write a better submission for this written piece, but there is still a part of me that has a deep knowing and belief in my ability to do this. And I think it's really important for us to tune into that and see if we can listen to that, and tune out all the other stuff, because I think, at the heart of me, Bob, if you haven't picked up on this already, is really a spiritualist. I think that we're having experience, and no one seems to want to talk about it too much, or it's one of those subjects that people kind of go, oh my God, we're going to talk about the meaning of life. But I've always been someone that's been interested in the experience of this, and talking about it and comparing it, as we talked about earlier on in the conversation. And so I can't help but think, perhaps rejection and failure is part of the operating system. And rather than it be, oftentimes I play with this as a thought experiment. And I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this, Bob. As a thought experiment. What if the supposition was this? What if all the rejections and all the failures were actually part of a curriculum?
Oh, I like that.
What if all of these things were stacked up like taxis at a taxi rank and had to be experienced?
Yeah.
From the point of view of it being your curriculum. In esoteric Eastern philosophy, they'd call it your dharma, right? And I play with that a lot now as I get older. I'm in middle age. I'm in my early 50s. And, rather than sort of see misfortune and some of the self-inflicted wounds that I've carried out upon myself over the years in terms of my own suffering, and there have been plenty of those. Rather than seeing them as sort of random happenstance, matter of fact, lightning bolts out of the sky, I kind of enjoy playing with the idea. Oh, hang on a second. There's a divine orchestration here, and there was a like a school curriculum that was written out for Luke before all of this, before the great puff, and all these things that I feel and interpret as adversarial and difficult and challenging and things to be overcome. They're really sacred events. And if I can find a way of seeing them as such, there is an alchemy available to me. And it's almost like I can use that as a drawbridge. I can step across this bridge into this sort of more enhanced version of me. And when I say more enhanced, Bob, I mean someone that is brave enough to occupy more space. I feel as though that becomes available to me when I start to see rejection and failure as something that is necessary to my evolution rather than something that I must endure. Do you have any thoughts or
Yeah, I
comments
love
about
the
that?
idea of a curriculum. I mean, the truth is we're always getting an education in something or other. Life itself is an education. And so we're smart if we treat it as such. I mean, the truth is not everybody immediately recognizes that life has something to teach you. And I go back to what I thought about my grandmother's comment that you learn something every day. I mean, I was kind of dismissive about it. Um, and it took me a long time to see that what she was saying is if if you have your antenna out, you do learn something every day. It
Mm.
is the truth. Um, but it's only if you're paying attention. And it's only if you're really trying to take it in. Um, so, everybody should experience every experience as fully as possible. I mean, experience is there to be experienced. And I, I know that sounds like gobbledygook, but some people, I mean, myself included, will go through experiences without maybe fully experiencing. So I
Mm.
think it's you have to let stuff register, and it all should register. Everything that happens should register with you because it's all there. I mean, it's all there to be explored and discovered, and it's all a way to learn something. So I mean, um, yeah, whether it's success or failure. By the way, just on a side note, for what it's worth, I mentioned before that I really never have talked about rejection before. I don't really talk about success such as it is either. I'm just um, hesitant to do that, either in conversation or in print to any degree greater than I think I should. And the reason is that I like to kind of hold myself in check. And I think it's just basically good form, um, to embody and maybe demonstrate a level of humility. There was a conversation with some people that I was in a few years ago, and somebody was asking me what I do, and I said I'm a writer, and the person asked me if I'd been published, and I said yes. That was the answer I gave. I just said yes. And afterwards, my daughter, who was there, said, you could have named some of the publications you've written for if you'd wanted to. I mean, and maybe you should have. Why were you so bashful about it? And it's just, what can I say? It's just how I like to proceed. I have no idea what that means in connection with this conversation. It's just a side note because we're talking about rejection, and the other side of the coin is success. So, I mean, I guess maybe, um, just as you should not let failure eat you alive, you should not let success of any sort go to your head either. I realize that's hardly an original statement, but I think the more you can keep yourself on a level, on an even keel, the better off you're going to be. Because when something's turned down, something of mine is turned down, I try not to take it too hard. And when something is accepted, I try not to celebrate too hard either. Um, I try to be measured about it. Um, and it's hard because when stuff is accepted, I do get excited. I mean, I'm 73 years old, and when an editor accepts something of mine now, I still get excited. And this is more than 50 years later.
I
Still
love
get
that.
excited about something I've written appearing in print. Still get excited about seeing my byline. Still get excited if it's a notable publication. Um, and still get excited when I get responses from readers, and when readers say, I like what you wrote, I understood it, I feel the same, um, and so on. So, um, I think maybe it helps also in dealing with rejection if you still have that excitement about what you're doing. If you're still excited about what you do, um, that's that goes far toward cushioning the rejections. And it also
Yeah.
goes back to what Saul Bellow said. I mean, if you're still excited about it, you're in a pretty good position to say, the hell with the editor who turned me down.
Yeah.
I'm still excited. And I still have faith in this piece that I wrote, still have faith in myself. I'm going to send it to another editor, and soon enough, it's going to get accepted.
To hell with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Hey, Bob, I guess to use a racing analogy, we're kind of almost on the final straight of the conversation. I've really enjoyed uh, continuing to get to know you and talk about the merits and the benefits of rejection. Um, One last question from me. In the article, you say, by no means am I recommending rejection as a desired outcome or a stepping stone to success. I want to I want to kick that around with you a little bit because the way I see that is invariably, in fact, in almost every instance, I am assuming rejection is the preceding stepping stone before the success. And so,
I would rewrite that sentence. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but uh, now that you're reading it, I'm realizing I'm contradicting myself. I mean, I'm definitely not recommending that people pursue rejection, um, or that people take any pleasure in it, because it is certainly an undesirable outcome, but it is most certainly a stepping stone. I mean, it's the only reason I was able to write the article in the first place, and it's the only
yeah,
way anybody can ever accept rejection if you see it as a stepping stone. So, um, I wish I'd had you as an editor before I submitted the article,
yeah.
because I would have rewritten that sentence. I think I definitely contradicted myself.
Well, the reason it caught my eye was not to point out any sort of contradiction.
Okay.
It was really to kind of put this thought out into the universe, and that is, maybe rejection should be the recommendation.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe maybe as we grow children into adults and pass on wisdom, maybe the expectation and the experience that they have. is rejection. I think there's a lot to be said for. I'm big on inoculating myself from suffering. Be that pain of rejection, be that the pain of failure, and I've got a sneaking suspicion that we can do that. We can really inoculate ourselves from the type of grief that someone feels when their love is unrequited, or their submission is rejected, or their job application is rejected, or the business fails. I think there's gold dust in these events. And to your point earlier, if we're attuned enough to the circumstances, it's almost like we can extract the critical minerals that are contained within each of our rejections.
Yes, somebody I think once said, if you're not getting rejected, you're not trying hard enough. And that rings true for me. I think that unless you are getting rejected, you're not reaching high enough. And unless you're getting rejected, you may be doing something wrong. Maybe you're making everything too easy for yourself. One has to be a little daring, and maybe you could even call it presumptuous or pushy. I mean, the whole idea, for example, of my writing about my own life, that's about as presumptuous as it gets. But nobody gets anywhere without presuming something. So, I think, yeah, I think that it's what everyone should definitely matriculate into the school of rejection, because and come out with a diploma. One last thought. I think I know we talked about this a little before. It's the idea. I mean, everybody's heard of post-traumatic stress syndrome, and a psychologist I came to know recently taught me about something called post-traumatic stress resilience, which is the flip side of PTSD. And it's when people come through trauma. It's when people come through difficulty and adversity, and they're now stronger as a result. They've shown resilience, and it has strengthened them. Just recently, I was getting a tennis lesson, and I developed a blister, and it made it very hard for me to swing the racket with any degree of comfort. And my instructor came over, and ultimately he took me around the corner to his wife, who happened to be a nurse, and she bandaged me. But he said that, and everybody knows this, he said, this, you have a blister here, but if you keep playing, the blister turns into a callus. And that's what has to happen with your attitude also, I think. You may be blistered by rejection, but if you form a callus, you'll be able to weather it better. You'll be able to keep swinging the racket.
Yeah. It's a great analogy. Last question, Bob. And it is it is related to advice. I guess, given the fact that the article was really, what you've learned over 50 years of rejection, drawing upon the 50 years of writing and the 73 years of living, and all of the rejections, and personal and professional, what would you offer someone, be it advice, be it a teaching or a lesson that you've learned over the years that has been something that you've been able to feel into and seek relief with? Is there anything that comes to mind? What would you offer someone that's going through a period of sustained rejection, if they're on their own path of repeated rejections to job proposals, writing submissions, personal relationships. What is there anything that comes to mind?
Yes, it's a daunting question. I wish I had all sorts of wisdom to impart. I do not profess to be an expert on how people should deal with rejection. I know how I've dealt with it, and so in the personal, I'm trying to find the universal. But I think what comes to mind for me here is that if you want to keep going, if you really want to keep going, you will keep going. It's that faith in yourself again that is absolutely essential. Nothing can happen without it. So, people ask or people wonder, how do I keep going? And I think if you want to keep going, you will keep going. And sometimes if you keep going, it helps you keep going because you build a certain muscle and you build a certain momentum. And if you're lucky, you reach a point where you're just gliding along.
Yeah. It's a beautiful place to leave the conversation. Bob, is there anything that you wanted to get to and cover and talk about that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
I think we covered a whole lot. My mind was definitely stretched by this conversation. Now it's going to snap back to its original size. It has been a great pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, listen, Bob, I just want to thank you. You've been, so generous with your time and, reaching out and receiving a random message from someone on Facebook, which has led to this conversation. But I just
Yeah.
wanted to acknowledge you as a writer and your skill as a writer, and your willingness to take on a subject like rejection, and expose a part of you, and then to want to be part of this conversation. So thank you for all of that, the creative spark that you are, and all the success that you've had as well. So long may that continue, Bob. Keep on showing up and keep on submitting those ideas for writing projects.
Thank you, Luke. I've enjoyed our conversation and I wish you the very best.
Thanks, Bob.